Just a bit of housekeeping. If your question box disappears, just simply click on the red question box up in the corner, and that'll bring the arrow and it'll bring it back up. If you want to ask the presenter a question, simply type your question into the question box and press send. And if you're having any audio problems, you can call in by using your telephone or switching from the audio from mic and speaker to telephone, and then dial the number provided. With that, I'll pass you over to Catriona.
Thanks, Paul. So as Paul said, tonight's webinar is called Making BREEDPLAN Work for You, Performance Recording Problems to Avoid. And this is the third in 6 webinars which SBTS and TBTS will be running this year. So the rest of them are up there. If anyone hasn't registered and you're interested in any of the ones that are remaining, you can register for them later. So Paul and myself and Alex McDonald, we spend quite a bit of time answering questions from individual breeders about their EBVs. So often people will say to us, well, why don't my EBVs reflect what I see on farm? Or why does my top performing animal have a poor EBV? And often what we find when we start to investigate and do some diagnostics is that there's either been poor quality data or poor data structure for the performance data submitted to BREEDPLAN. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen a lot of the time. So what I want to do tonight is outline some of the common performance problems that we see and discuss how to avoid them. Okay, so the first problem we see is inadequate planning. So one cause of performance recording problems is this casual performance recording where performance of important traits for producers is given inadequate planning or inadequate priority. So in these cases, producers will often not record performance data at the correct age. So a common example of this that I see quite a bit is scanning animals that are too young to be scanned. Now, obviously, scanning is quite an expensive trait to measure, so we don't want you guys to be measuring it and not get useful data from that, because that's just a waste of everyone's money. We often see that in these sort of cases that performance data is recorded in an ad hoc manner, and often people will submit data to BREEDPLAN on the day of or after the performance submission deadline. So for example, they might have a sale coming up and they'll submit the data to BREEDPLAN for the run that's going to happen just before their before their sale. So what we recommend you do is become a proactive performance recorder. Know what traits you want to record, know when to record them, and incorporate the collection of performance information into the management of your herd. So, you know, for example, when you wean, you might always take a 200-day weight, that sort of thing. Make sure you plan your data collection ahead of time, and also submit your data to BREEDPLAN shortly after data collection. So that way, if you know that you take 400-day weights on an animal a few months before your sale that's coming up, you can take that data, get the data into BREEDPLAN, and then you're not rushing trying to get that data in just before your sale. So the second problem we often see is poor recording of recipient dam information. So there's a number of seed stock producers that are using embryo transfer within their breeding programs. But for most breeds, the BREEDPLAN analysis only directly compares ET calves which are out of the recipient dam of the same breed. So if you've got ET calves, but the recipient dam information is not recorded, or recipient dams of different breeds are used, then performance recording problems can occur. So what we recommend for this problem is that you use recipient dams that are all the same breed when running an ET program, and ensure that these recipient dams are recorded with your breed society or association, so that for each ET calf we know who the recipient dam is and we've got some information on her breed. And ideally, try and use known recipient dams. So for example, if you're running ET programs across multiple years, try and use the same recipient dams. Or if you've got some stud cows that aren't quite up to producing stud animals themselves, so your culls, for example, you might consider using those cull animals out of your stud for recipient dams, and that way they'll all be the same breed, and those calves, those ET calves, can be compared head to head. Okay, and the third problem I want to touch on is unverified outliers. So we see this quite a bit. So when we have a breed plan analysis run, we look at how much variation there is between the performance of animals within a contemporary group. So we expect to see some variation. Obviously, animals aren't going to perform exactly the same, but we expect to see a certain amount of variation. So we don't expect to see huge differences between the performance of animals within the same contemporary group, because this contemporary group is formed by animals that have had equal opportunity to perform. So when the differences between the performance record for one animal and the average of all animals in the contemporary group is greater than we would normally expect, this animal is identified as an outlier. And for all of you, those that are listening that are interested in statistics, this is an outlier is 3 standard deviations above or below the mean. So just to illustrate what an outlier is, I've put a graph up here. So we've got the weight range in kilograms along the bottom and the number of animals that fall into this weight category along the y-axis. And we can see that the majority of animals measure in from 211 up to 310 kilograms. But we've got one animal down here that measures between 131 and 150 kilograms. So in this case, this animal circled in red is an outlier. The performance of this animal is quite different from the rest of the group, and in this case, this animal has underperformed. We often see, so outliers aren't just animals that underperform, they can also be animals that appear to overperform. So once again, we've got a contemporary group of animals, their weight ranges along the x-axis, and along the y-axis we've got the number of animals that fall into each of those weight categories. And we can see that the majority of animals here are falling in between 231 kilograms up to 350 kilograms. But we've got this one animal out here that's measuring between 431 and 450 kilograms. So this is an example of an animal that's an outlier that's performed better than the average of the group. So the reason that BREEDPLAN identifies outliers is to highlight any potential data recording errors which may have occurred. So outliers can occur for a variety of reasons. So one is that the incorrect measurement is recorded. So for example, every time data is transcribed, there's a chance that there'll be an error. So if it's come in on a paper form, might have been typed wrong onto the BREEDPLAN system, or if you've typed it into Excel yourself, you might have hit the wrong button sometimes when that data is being recorded. Sometimes the incorrect animal details will be recorded. So for example, an incorrect date of birth. So we might see that an animal that was actually born in 2015 has been recorded as being born in 2014. And so if this animal's measured on a similar date, or the same date to those animals that are born in 2014, it will look a lot less heavy because it's a year younger, but the analysis is treating it as if it's a 2014 born animal rather than a 2015 born animal. And another reason is that animals may have been placed in an incorrect contemporary group. So for example, that animal may have been sick, it may not have performed as well as its peers, but it hasn't been given a different management group. So it's still being compared to its contemporaries. And of course, our fourth reason is that animal may just be significantly genetically superior or inferior to their peers. So once an outlier is identified, an outlier report is sent to the owner of the animal. So this is an example of the outlier report. and it's got the herd, so we see some herd information, where to return it to, and then all of this information here. So all of these animals are a single contemporary group, and this animal here is our outlier. So we can see it's got a little hash sign here next to it and another hash sign here next to the raw observation. So in this case, this animal has been weighed and it's a couple of 100 kilograms lighter than the rest of the animals in its contemporary group. So the breed plan analysis says, hang on, this looks a bit funny, it's a lot lighter, is there something going on? Now in this case it was a data entry error. This animal should have actually weighed 958 kilograms, and obviously someone's hit a 6 instead of a 9 somewhere. But this is just to give you an idea of what the outlier report looks like. And any animal in your outlier report with this hash next to its name and next to a raw observation is the outlier. So what happens to outlier records? So there's 3 things that can occur. If the owner checks the outlier record and discovers an error has occurred, then the record will be corrected and the updated performance included in future breed plan analyses. So that's exactly what happened with the example I've just shown you. That outlier was corrected and it will now be included in future breed plan analyses. The second option is that the owner can check the outlier record and conclude that that record is correct. So in that case, the animal is simply genetically inferior or superior. They need to ring breed plan up, verify that outlier, and that data will now be included in future analysis. However, if we don't hear back from an owner of an animal about this outlier record, then the record is removed from all future group breed plan analyses. So that is, the data is not included in any breed plan analysis unless it is either corrected or verified. So what do you need to do? When you receive an outlier report, you need to check whether the performance information has been correctly recorded, whether or not the animal details are correct. So is it a male when it should be a female, or is it a 2015 born animal that's been recorded as having been born in 2014? And also make sure that that animal is being analysed in the correct contemporary group. So for example, was that animal sick and that's why the performance, it's underperformed, or was that animal on feed and that's why it's overperformed? So if everything's correct, you need to contact the breed plan office and verify the outlier. If the performance data, animal details, and or the contemporary group information is incorrect, you need to contact breed plan and either correct the outlier value, correct those animal details, or correct the management group. So to prevent having your outliers excluded from the analysis, you need to pay attention to all correspondence you receive from breed plan and verify or correct all outliers as soon as you receive an outlier report. So have we got any questions on those first 3 problems? So I'll give you 30 seconds or so. So if you've got a question, you can type that into the question box now and press enter so that it pops up on our screen. Okay, so we've had one question come through. So what is too young to scan? Scanning can occur between 300 and, Paul, is it 700 or 800 days the upper limit? Can you remember? I think we've lost Paul. So younger than 300 days is too young to scan.
800 it is.
800, thank you. So 300 to 800 days of age is is the age that they need to be to scan. Most people do them as rising 2-year-olds, so around 600 days of age. But sometimes we'll get people that will send in scan data on 6-month or 9-month-old animals, and we can't use that in the analysis. The next question is, can you update this for past animals? Yes, if you've got an outlier report that's a couple of years old, you can ring the BREEDPLAN office and either verify or correct that outlier depending on what the situation is, whether or not you need to verify or correct. And just to clarify, that animal was born in 2012. Yes, so you can definitely ring up and correct the outlier for a 2012 born animal. Okay, so we'll move on to the next couple of problems that we sometimes see. Problem 4 is inadequate recording of important traits. So BREEDPLAN can calculate EBVs for more than 20 traits, but an EBV must meet minimum accuracy criteria to report. So that means below a certain accuracy, the EBV won't report. But in some cases, EBVs will report when minimum performance data has been recorded for that trait, and that's because that accuracy, that minimum accuracy criteria they have to meet, has been met. So some common examples will have sometimes people ring up and say, my animal's got a birth weight EBV, but I never took a birth weight recorded. That's because the BREEDPLAN analysis is a multi-trait analysis, and the analysis uses correlations between the different traits to calculate EBVs for traits that haven't been recorded. And also, all growth EBVs may be reporting, but only a 200-day weight has been recorded. And once again, there's correlations between 200, 400, and 600-day weight, which is why you will often see all 3 of those growth EBVs reporting, but only one weight being recorded on the individual. And sometimes only weight traits have been recorded, but carcass EBVs are also displaying. So while there's nothing wrong with these EBVs displaying, because they are meeting that minimum accuracy threshold that they're required to meet, and so they've been generated from pedigree information and performance recorded for correlated traits, generally what we see is that these EBVs will be of lower accuracy. So if the trait is important to you or your clients, we recommend that you record it, because by recording that trait, you'll get a higher accuracy EBV, which is more useful for, or gives you more information, or more accurate information on the genetic potential of those animals. So our solutions to this problem is to make sure that you record all traits that are important to you and your clients, and don't just rely on pedigree and minimal trait recording to generate EBVs for your herd. Okay, so the next problem I'm going to talk about is poor genetic linkage. So genetic linkage allows us to link our contemporary groups. So as I said a little bit earlier, animals are compared in contemporary groups. These contemporary groups are made up of animals that have had equal opportunity to perform. So to link these contemporary groups together, we have this thing called genetic linkage, and this links contemporary groups within herd, across herd, and potentially across countries. So some breeds are running a multi-country analysis, so a trans-Tasman analysis, for example. And so genetic linkage was covered in detail in the previous webinar, and that webinar was recorded and can be watched on the SBTS and TBTS YouTube channel if you missed it and you're interested. But the problem with poor genetic linkage is that some common management practices can reduce genetic linkage significantly. So within herd, genetic linkage can be reduced by completely replacing all sires from one joining season to the next. So for example, in year 1, you use sires 1, 2, and 3, and in year 2, you use sires 4, 5, and 6. We've got no common sire across those seasons. Another thing that can reduce within herd genetic linkage is managing calves from one sire differently to all other calves before you've recorded performance information. Not mixing cows after joining can also reduce genetic linkage. And in situations where all ET calves are by the same sire and potentially dam, this can also reduce genetic linkage. Across herd genetic linkage can be reduced by all sires that are used in the herd having no performance recorded progeny in any other herds. So, for example, all homebred sires that aren't being used anywhere else is an example. Managing the calves from one sire, such as an AI sire, differently to others before you record traits, and also AI calves in a herd being born at a separate time to those from natural mating. So this will mean if there's a large separation in the time between your AI calves and your natural calves, that those calves won't end up being compared head to head, and so that can create problems with genetic linkage. So what we recommend is that you don't replace all sires from one year to the next. You don't have to have all the same sires, but it's important that there's a common sire there so that across-year comparisons can be made. Where possible, use sires that have progeny recorded for a range of traits in other herds. So, for example, you might use an AI sire alongside your homebred bulls, so that you've got an outside genetics coming in and to be compared to performance in other herds, and also mix your cows after joining, particularly your AI females. It's really important that you manage calves by a range of sires as a single group until after your performance traits have been recorded. So we don't want to manage all of the calves from sire A differently to all the calves from sire B. We want to manage them in as big a group as possible until we've got all of that information that we're recording on them. Where possible, in your ET programs, try to have a range of sires represented. And lastly, ensure calves from an AI program are born at a similar time to calves that have been conceived by your homebred sires, so that you can have that genetic linkage where your homebred bulls, the progeny of them, are being compared directly with the progeny of your AI sires, and that AI sire can link you to other herds, and your performance of your homebred bulls can therefore the progeny of your homebred bulls can therefore be compared via the AI sire as the genetic linkage sire. So I see there's a few more questions that have come through, but if anyone's got any more questions, type them in now. We've got one question on accuracy. So is the lowest accuracy recorded or displayed 20%? Accuracy, traditionally what happened was each breed society had their own minimum accuracy thresholds. These minimum accuracy thresholds varied for different traits, and what we also saw a lot of breeds doing was if an animal was observed, so for example, if the animal for 200-day weight, for example, if the animal had been observed for 200-day weight, or if it had progeny which had been observed for 200-day weight, that animal would be considered observed for 200-day weight, and its minimum accuracy threshold for a 200-day weight EBV to display would be lower than a animal which hadn't been observed for 200-day weight. So the unobserved animal would need a higher minimum accuracy threshold for that EBV to display. So we've still got a couple of Australian breed societies that are using that system, but at the start of this year, the majority of our breed societies in Australia moved to a single minimum accuracy threshold across all traits, and the same minimum accuracy threshold was applied for all animals, regardless of whether or not they had been observed for that trait. The lowest minimum accuracy threshold in any of the breeds is 25%, but it does vary a little bit. There's some breeds that are a little bit higher than that as their minimum accuracy threshold. So if anyone's got questions about their specific breed, you can contact your SBTS or TBTS officer and we'll be able to look up the minimum accuracy thresholds for your specific breed for you. The next question, should birth weight be recorded to nearest kilogram or part kilogram? To nearest kilogram. And then we've got a question on contemporary groups. So what is classed as one contemporary group? If the first calf was born today and one born each week for the next 12 weeks, will they all be in the same group? So I'm going to talk about contemporary groups in a minute. There are a number of criteria that BREEDPLAN uses to form contemporary groups, and I'll put them up in a minute. But there is some age slicing in there as well. So no, your 12 weeks, your calves born 12 weeks apart would not always wouldn't end up in the same contemporary group, because that age gap's a bit too far apart. And the last question is, why display a low accuracy EBV if it has little relevance? They're not relevant. They're just a low accuracy EBV, which gives us the best information we have available on that animal's genetics at the time. So we expect with accuracy, we expect a young animal will have low accuracy to start with when it's first born and it first gets EBVs, so that will be a low accuracy EBV. As we collect performance data on that individual, the accuracy will increase. And then once that animal starts having progeny, the accuracy will increase again. So they are displayed because they give us the best estimate of the genetic merit of that animal available at the time. But that EBV can be improved the accuracy of that EBV can be improved throughout the animal's life. So because young animals will have low accuracy EBVs to start with, we don't want to not display them and not give anyone any information on the genetic merit of young individuals, but we do expect that the accuracy of those EBVs will increase over the animal's lifetime. Okay, so that's all the questions we've got at the moment. So moving on. Problem 6 is small contemporary groups. So contemporary group formation was covered in detail in the previous webinar, and that webinar is available to watch on the SBTS and TBTS YouTube channel. So briefly, contemporary groups, there's a number of criteria that the BREEDPLAN analysis uses to form contemporary groups. So some of those are automatic. So animals will only be in a contemporary group if they're in the same herd, if they've been born in the same calving year, if they're the same sex. So bull calves are only compared to other bull calves, heifer calves are only compared to other heifer calves, and steers are only compared to other steers. ET calves are never compared to natural or AI calves, but natural and AI calves can be compared together. Excuse me. Twin calves are not compared to single-born calves. We do have some age slicing. I haven't put the age slicing information in, but for 200-day weight, that's a 45-day age slice. And for 400 and 600-day weight, that's a 60-day age slice. So animals need to be born within a certain time period to be put into the same contemporary group, and that age slicing is in place because we know that seasons change over time, so we don't want to be comparing animals for 200-day weight which were born 2 months apart. Sorry, not 2 months, 3 months apart, for example, where the season has changed slightly. And with our birth traits, the dam age is also an automatic split, so the first calves from first calvers are never compared to older cows' calves for birth traits. Then we've got another couple of automatic contemporary group formation things that form contemporary groups, but they can be breeder influenced. So animals must be of the same breed to be compared within a contemporary group, and they must have the same weigh date history. So if you weigh half your calves on day 1 and the other half of your calves on day 2, they've got a different weigh date. They won't be compared head to head in a contemporary group. And then we've also got some breeder supplied information that helps form contemporary groups. So these are breeder-defined management groups for birth traits and post-birth traits. So, for example, you might provide a management group if an animal has been sick. That's one example of a management group. Or if you've got animals running in two different paddocks, where one paddock's got a lot of feed and one doesn't have much feed at all, they're running in different environments, so you would provide different management groups for those two groups of animals. But like I said, if anyone wants any more information on contemporary group formation, I recommend that you watch the contemporary group that ran the other week, because that went into a lot more detail on contemporary group formation. So our problem with small contemporary groups, and ideally what we want with a contemporary group is a minimum of 6 calves, preferably with multiple sires represented. So the reason for that is the effectiveness of performance is maximised when we get to 6 calves. So if we look along here, this is our contemporary group size and the record effectiveness. And we can see that for an animal that's in a contemporary group of 1, we can't use that data, so the record effectiveness is 0. This increases when we have a contemporary group of 2, and as we move up to a contemporary group of 6, we can see that the effectiveness of those records has increased greatly. But once we get past 6 to 10 animals in a contemporary group, the effectiveness of those records tapers off. So we don't get a huge advantage for having a contemporary group size of 30 compared to a contemporary group size of 10. So we're aiming for a contemporary group size of a minimum of 6 calves. So small contemporary groups are a problem that are frequently experienced by smaller herds, just because they've got less animals in these smaller herds. And so without careful management, these can result in performance recording problems. So one example, several years ago, we had an ag college that got their students to collect a 200-day, or to calculate exactly when each of their calves born would turn 200 days of age. And so the students then weighed each calf when it turned exactly 200 days of age. Now, that's a really good maths exercise, but it's terrible for breed plan contemporary group formation, because if we remember back a couple of slides, one of our criteria for breed plan contemporary group formation was that animals must be weighed on the same day. So this is what happened. They had 8 weaners. 3 of those were heifer calves and 5 of those were bull calves, so they automatically get split because we don't compare heifers to bulls. And because each of these weaners had a different weigh date, every single weaner got put into its own contemporary group. So they each were in a contemporary group of 1. Now, BREEDPLAN can't use this data because there's nothing to compare the performance of each individual animal to, and so effectively that data can't be used by BREEDPLAN. What should have happened is those 8 weaners would have been split into 3 heifer calves and 5 bull calves, but if they were all weighed on the same day, we'd expect the 3 heifer calves to go into one contemporary group and the 5 bull calves to go into another contemporary group, and that means that we've got some head-to-head comparisons that can occur within that contemporary group. Now, obviously, they're not making that minimum of 6, but 3 calves head-to-head is better than 3 calves all in a single contemporary group. So some of our solutions to preventing small management groups is to restrict calving periods. A calving period of 6 to 8 weeks is ideal because that brings your calves into around that 45 to 60 day age slice. So 45-day age slice is what BREEDPLAN analysis uses for birth weight and for 200 day weight. And that 60-day age slice is what we're using for 400 and 600 day weights. Run as many calves as possible under the same management conditions. So also weigh all of your animals in a management group on the same day. And if the management group has to be split, measure all calves before splitting the group. So for example, if you know that you're going to steer your cull bull animals, make sure you take a 200-day weight on everything while they're still entire bulls before you castrate those steers. Or for example, if you know that you're going to be taking some of the animals out to show them and so they're going to be getting supplementary feed, Make sure you take a weight on all of the animals and then split the calves that are going into the show team out and start feeding them. Try and create management groups based on those automatic criteria that we were discussing earlier. So split your calves on calving year, on sex, all those sort of things, so that they're naturally being managed within those automatic criteria for contemporary groups. If you have a commercial herd of the same or similar breed as your stud animals, it may be possible to record these with your breed society or association. Now, this can help small herds that have a small stud but a larger commercial herd, because this can get the number of animals within a single contemporary group up and help that increase. So if this is applies to your situation, check with your breed society or association as to whether or not they allow you to register your commercial animals with them. And in any situation where two herds are running their animals together on a property, you can set up an association membership with BREEDPLAN. So what that does is that allows those two herds to be compared together, because as we said earlier, one of the automatic criteria is that animals must be in the same herd. So this association membership with BREEDPLAN would be a good example, would happen, for example, if we might have a stud that's run by the parents and they might have a child with a couple of stud cows of their own that are registered in a different herd. That's the sort of situation where you can set up an association membership so that those two herds are being compared head to head within the BREEDPLAN analysis. Problem 7 is single sire contemporary groups. So just as we don't want single animal contemporary groups because BREEDPLAN can't use that data effectively, it's important to try and avoid single sire contemporary groups. Single sire contemporary groups can be experienced by herds of all sizes, and if not carefully managed, these can result in considerable performance recording problems. So when all calves in a contemporary group are by the same sire, and that means that there's no other calves by other sires for which the performance of these calves can be directly compared. So we can't compare how the calves of sire A are performing relative to the calves of sire B. So while we can use the data from animals in single sire contemporary groups to calculate EBVs for themselves and for their dams, this information doesn't contribute to the EBV of their sire. So one way that we can avoid this is to mix mobs. So in this example, we've got mob A, and this mob consists of 40 cows, and the cows have been AI'd to sire A and then put up with a natural backup joining bull sire B. And in mob B, we've also got 40 cows. They've been AI'd to sire C and put out with backup bull sire D. So we're going to assume a 50% AI success rate, which means that in mob A, we've got 20 cows joined to sire A and 20 cows joined to sire B. And in mob B, we've got 20 cows joined to sire C and 20 cows joined to sire D. Now, in this situation, some of the sire B calves will be born close enough to the sire A AI calves that they'll go into a multiple sire contemporary group. But what could happen if we've got some cows that have cycled a couple of times and haven't got pregnant until, say, their second or third cycle, those sire B calves, those late sire B calves, will end up in a single sire contemporary group by themselves because they're more than 45 days after the sire A calves have been born. And the same thing will happen in mob B. We'll get the sire C AI calves being compared to some of the sire D calves, but some of those later born sire D calves will just be in a single sire contemporary group. So to prevent that, when you wean the calves from the previous year, so after joining, you can mix your mobs. Now, ideally, we'd mix mobs equally, but that's not always the case. But try and get some cows from each sire into a mob together. So in this case, what we'd end up with is with 10 cows joined to sire A, 10 cows joined to sire B, 10 cows joined to sire C, and 10 cows joined to sire D in mob A. and the same again in Mob B. And so what we would expect to see within Mob A, we'd expect that there'll be some animals in a contemporary group where sire A, B, C, and D are represented, but for those late natural calves, we'd still expect then to see contemporary groups where sire B and sire D, our natural mating bulls, have calves represented. So we know we're avoiding that single sire situation because we'll either have 4 sires represented or 2 sires represented in the contemporary groups. So to try and avoid single sire contemporary groups, we recommend that you use more than 1 sire in each particular joining, that you mix your cows after joining and after weaning calves from previous years, as I've just demonstrated, and that you consciously try and manage your herd so that more than 1 sire is represented in each contemporary group. The 8th problem I want to touch on tonight is selective performance recording. So this can be something that causes big problems for BREEDPLAN EBVs. So selective performance recording occurs when only a selection of animals in a contemporary group are recorded. Sometimes people think that if they just record their best animals, their EBVs will be better for their best animals, but this isn't the case, and doing this can cause really big problems that we'll go through in a minute. So the performance information of an individual can only be compared to the selection of animals that have been recorded, and if this selection is not an accurate representation of the entire contemporary group, the BREEDPLAN analysis cannot make accurate comparisons, and thus the EBVs produced may be biased or misleading. So to demonstrate that, we've got 10 animals here, and they're all in the one contemporary group, and they've all been weighed for 200-day weight. So we can see their weights down here in kilograms, and we can see that the group average is 233 kilograms. If we look at this selective example, we can see that only 6 of the animals have been recorded. So those 4 lightest animals, animal 4, 5, 8 and 10, their weights have not been submitted to BREEDPLAN. And what this does is this makes the average of the group higher. So the average of the group is now 252 kilograms rather than 233 kilograms. And so animal 2, which is 238 kilograms, if we look at his performance in the entire contemporary group over here, we see that at 238 kilograms, he's performing above the average of the whole contemporary group. But if we look at this selective example, we can see that he's actually performing under the average of the selected group. And the same with animal 7. Over here at 237 kilograms, this animal is performing above the average of the group, but when only a subset of the animals are performance recorded, this animal is now performing below the average of the contemporary group. So what this means is that the EBVs will be biased. These animals that are highlighted in red appear to be performing below average, and so the BREEDPLAN analysis will go, well, those animals aren't performing as well as expected. But if that selective performance recording hadn't occurred, they're really performing above the average of the entire contemporary group. But because that data hasn't been supplied, this selective recording will bias the EBVs. So to avoid selective recording, adopt a whole herd recording strategy. So don't just record the good ones, we need the bad ones in there as well so that we can get accurate comparisons of how your animals are comparing head to head. Record all of your calves with your breed society or association. Always record performance for all calves in a contemporary group, and where possible, take a measurement before you split that group. And record performance on all available animals. So try and record information on your heifers, steers and bulls, not just your bulls, but don't just record the weights of your, say, top 10% heaviest bulls. Make sure you record the weights of everything. So, have we got any questions? So this question was asked earlier. Does that mean one animal would have no EBVs? I'm assuming that this is relating to the single animal contemporary group, but if it's not, please retype the question. If an animal is in a single animal contemporary group, the animal can still receive EBVs, but what it will receive is mid-parent EBVs. So, for example, if the sire was plus 20 for milk and the dam was plus 10 for milk, then we'd expect the mid-parent EBV to be plus 15 for milk. And so if we can't use the performance recording information because an animal is in a single animal contemporary group, it just gets mid-parent EBVs. So they will still get EBVs, but their own performance won't be contributing to their EBVs. The next question, what if one animal in a group is sick? That's a good question. I guess the thing I should have said, which I didn't, was even in the best managed herds, you will get the odd animal that is sick, and so you will get the odd animal that ends up in a single animal contemporary group. What we aim to do is to try and minimise how many animals we have in single animal contemporary groups, but obviously if that animal is sick, we don't want to be comparing it to animals that have not been sick and so have probably performed better. And another question, slightly off topic, but how do international sires get EBVs introduced to Australia without measured progeny in Australia? For some breeds, BREEDPLAN imports EPDs, for example, and uses those to help calculate the EBVs. Generally, we find that once an animal's had 10 or so Australian-born progeny, those EPDs aren't contributing a lot to the EBVs in Australia. And I think we've got one more question coming through. All right, so we'll move on to the last section. So problem 9, I want to talk about over-management grouping. So, as I said earlier, we want a contemporary group to ideally have a minimum of 6 animals and preferably have multiple sires represented. One common problem is the separation of calves into many small contemporary groups. So this can occur because calves are managed in small groups, which, as we've talked about, we want to try and keep all of our calves in as big a group as possible. And also, the other thing that can cause this is many different management groups being submitted by the breeder, even though the calves are being run as part of one large contemporary group. So this is very similar to a question I got asked a couple of weeks ago. And what we see in this situation is that the breeder has assigned 4 different management groups to male calves for weaning weight, despite the fact that the calves are being managed as one group. So in this case, we've got 20 male weaners, and 4 of them have a breeder-defined management group of 1, 6 of them have a breeder-defined management group of 2, 5 of them have a breeder-defined management group 3, and 5 of them have a breeder-defined management group 4. So because they've got different management groups, they're automatically split into 4 different contemporary groups. And in this example, I am just assuming that they're all within the age slicing so as not to complicate things. But you can imagine if age slicing starts to come into play, this can split these contemporary groups even further. So that's what happened for 200-day weight. And then what we see is that when this breeder has submitted yearling weights, they assign an additional 4 different management groups, despite the calves having been managed as one group. So we've got our 20 male weaners. There they are in their 4 different management groups for 200-day weight. Of the 4 that were in management group 1 for their 200-day weight, 1 of them has been assigned management group A for 400-day weight. 2 of them have been assigned management group B, and 1 of them has been assigned management group C. So we've gone from having 1 management group of 4 for 200-day weight to 3 different management groups, which has split them into 3 very small contemporary groups for 400-day weight. If we look at the 6 calves that were in management group 2 for 200-day weight, we can see that 1 of them's been assigned management group A for 400 days, 1 of them's been assigned management group B, 2 have been assigned management group C, and 2 have been assigned management group D. So that split this contemporary group of 6 calves into a further 4 groups of calves. These 5 calves that were assigned management group 3 at 200 days for 200-day weight, they've been split into 2 groups. So 2 have been assigned management group A, and 3 have been assigned management group B. And of the 5 calves that were assigned into management group 4 for 200-day weight, they've been assigned 4 different management groups for 400-day weight. So we end up with 1 in management group A, 1 in management group B, 1 in management group C, and 2 in management group D. So this has split from 4 200-day weight contemporary groups. We've now got 13 different management groups, 13 different contemporary groups, for 400-day weight. So in this case, over management grouping has split these calves into lots of very small contemporary groups. So what should have happened in this situation, because these 20 male weaners were being run under the same conditions, they should all have been assigned management group 1 for 200-day weight, and for 400-day weight, they should have remained in management group 1. So we should have had all 20 of them being compared head to head. But as I've just shown you, if you over management group, you can split your calves into very, very small contemporary groups, and then we start getting problems with the effectiveness of those records because contemporary group size is small. So, solutions. Understand the automatic criteria used by the BREEDPLAN analysis to form contemporary groups. So this was our examples earlier of herd, calving year, sex, that sort of thing, ET versus natural and AI calves. And if you have to split calves, split them using these criteria. Only submit management groups for non-genetic factors. So for example, if you've got sick animals, submit a contemporary group for the animal that's sick. If you've got animals that are running under different conditions, so for example, different feed between mob A and mob B, you should assign management groups, but don't assign management groups when there's no differences in how those animals are being run. So if they're all running in one mob and there's no environmental differences in how they've been treated, don't submit different management groups. And for those of you that are breeding breeds that have got both horned and polled animals, please don't submit different management groups for horned and polled calves. Preferably, we'd like to see the horned and polled calves being run head to head, and if they are being run head to head where the environment's the same, there is no reason to split them into different management groups. And our last problem is problem 10, inadequate management grouping. So this is pretty much the opposite of the scenario we've just been through. So the reason BREEDPLAN analyses cattle in contemporary groups is to try and remove as many of those non-genetic, such as your environmental effects, as possible. And the underlying principle of contemporary groups is that only animals which have had equal opportunity to perform are directly compared within each contemporary group. When this does not occur, the EBVs will be less accurate and possibly misleading. So, in this example, breeder has 40 bulls born in the 2015 calving year. He's got 2 properties, so one mob of 10 is run on improved pasture on property 1, and the other mob of 30 is run on native pasture next door. So we've got 2 different environments. 5 bull calves from mob 1 was shown and so have been grain fed, and all bulls were weighed on the same day for 400-day weight. So because they've got the same weigh date history, that should put them in the same contemporary group. And in this case, no management groups are provided to BREEDPLAN. So what happens is we've got 40 yearling bulls. They're all weighed on the same day, and so they end up being analysed as one large mob. So we've got our 5 that are in the show team here that have been reared on property A with improved pasture and also grain fed. We've got our 5 in mob A that have been reared on property A on improved pasture, and we've got our 30 in mob B, which have been raised on property B with native grass. And what we would expect to happen here is these ones would look like they're performing really, really well because they've been on really good feed, and these ones would look like they're underperforming because they haven't had such good feed. And so this can bias these EBVs, because even though these animals haven't had equal opportunity to perform, BREEDPLAN hasn't been told this and they end up in the same group. So what should have happened in this situation is we have our 40 yearling bulls, we have our 5 times show team, which are assigned into one management group, so management group A. We've got our 5 from mob A that weren't part of the show team, so they're assigned management group B. And our 30 from mob B on the native grass, they're assigned management group C. And because they've been assigned different management groups, they won't be compared head to head. So we'll look at how these 5 animals compare to each other. We'll look at how these 5 animals compare to each other, and we'll look at how these 30 animals compare to each other. And so this is a much fairer situation because animals that have had equal opportunity are being compared head to head, and animals that have been on different feed aren't being compared head to head. So the solutions to avoiding under management grouping is to understand the importance and role of management groups, provide management groups for those animals which have been treated differently to their peers and have performed differently due to non-genetic factors. And if you are in any doubt, contact SBTS or TBTS staff for advice. So to finish, quality data equals quality EBVs and poor data equals poor quality EBVs. So it's important that we try and get as good a quality data as possible into BREEDPLAN so that our EBVs are good quality. So just before I finish the last little bit of the webinar, I'll just see if there's any more questions. And if anyone's got any questions, type them in. And if I don't get to them now, we'll go through the rest of the slides, and then I'll double check at the end whether or not there's any more questions. So the first question, once an animal is assigned a management group separate from the others, there is no need to continue submitting that group in subsequent data submissions. Technically no, because once they've split and they're in different contemporary groups, you can't put contemporary groups back together. So even if you assigned different management groups for half your calves for 200-day weight, and half went into mob A and half went onto mob B, management group A and management group B, even if you weighed them all for 400-day weight on the same day, they would still stay in management group A and management group B. However, you can continue to submit them with management groups. That's not an issue. And I know a lot of people that are using performance recording software, that will happen automatically when they'll put the management groups into their performance recording software, and when they send the extracts in, those management groups will be there. So you don't have to, but you can if they're there. The next question is, if weighing calves, so for example, when vaccinating, some may be older than 80 days and some younger. If submitting weights to BREEDPLAN, should all weights be submitted? Yes, we recommend that you just submit all of the weights. Obviously, for a 200-day wait, those animals that are younger than 80 days, that data won't be included in the analysis. So you can submit it, but we won't use it. And when you get your letter back saying that we've received your data, there'll just be a note that says these calves, A, B, C, D, were too young for that 200-day wait to be recorded, but to be used in the analysis. It will still go on file, we just won't use it. It's easier often to just submit all of the data and let the BREEDPLAN analysis sort out which data we can use and which data we can't use, rather than trying to do that yourself at home, and you might accidentally leave some data out that could be included. So I'd recommend just submitting all of it. The next question, will one of the webinars cover the software options which are useful for BREEDPLAN data submission? No. I think we may have done that in the first webinar last year. I can see who's asked that question, so I'll see if I can find the webinar on that for you, and I'll send the link through. But if people think that that's something that would be really useful to do in a webinar, please let us know, and we'll think about whether or not we can do a webinar on that topic. And a follow-up question from that question about the calves being younger than 80 days of age. If the younger ones are not submitted, will they forever be in a different group? So if later submitting weaning weights, when all will be in the age of 80 to 300 days? Yes, because they will have different weigh date histories. Those ones will be, the younger ones will be in a different contemporary group. So where possible, we'd prefer that you try and submit 200-day weights on everything that when all of the youngest calf is over 80 days of age. But if that's not possible and you're not going to have another opportunity to weigh those calves, the older ones of those calves, it's always better to get one weight on file rather than none. But if you've got the opportunity to not weigh any of them, and then wait till those younger ones get a bit older, that's the preferable thing to do. Okay, so I'm just going to finish the last couple of slides, and if there's any more questions that have come through, I'll answer them at the end. So if anyone's got any further information on, if anyone wants any further information on tonight's webinar, you can contact your SBTS or TBTS technical officer for your breed. So for Limousin and Simmental, that's Alex McDonald. For our tropical breeds, so Brahman, Brangus, Droughtmaster, Santa, Senapole and Simbra, that's Paul. For Wagyu, that's Carl. And then for Blonde, Charolais, Devon, Hereford, Murray Grey, Red Angus, Redpoll, Salers, Shorthorn and Speckle Park. I'm the SBTS technical officer for those breeds. So our contact details are up here. If anyone's got any questions, please let us know. If you're interested in the rest of the 2016 SBTS and TBTS webinars, we've got 3 left. Webinar 4 is Fertility Matters, recording fertility information with BREEDPLAN. Webinar 5 is collecting abattoir carcass information for BREEDPLAN, and webinar 6 is Where To with genomics. So if you're interested, don't forget to register. And I'm just going to check if there's any more questions. Okay, no more questions. So thanks everyone for coming on and listening tonight. And we will hand back over to Paul. Paul, have you unmuted your microphone? Because I can't hear you.
Sorry about that once again. Feedback from tonight's webinar, there'll be a short poll that you can fill in once we're finished here. Following the completion of the webinar. The webinar has been recorded and we made available to anyone who was unable to attend and would like a copy. We can also access the answers to any of your unanswered questions by contacting the technical officer for your breed. So those webinars will be available on YouTube, as should be up by tomorrow morning. And thank you very much for that. Good night.
Thanks, everyone.